Few figures in world history rival Alexander the Great in terms of military genius, ambition, charisma, and psychological complexity. Born in 356 BCE to King Philip II of Macedon and Queen Olympias, Alexander was tutored by Aristotle and inherited a kingdom already poised for conquest. By the age of 30, he had conquered much of the known world from Greece to India, never losing a battle. But behind the brilliant strategist and heroic image lies a deeply layered psyche, one shaped by divine ambition, intense parental pressure, emotional volatility, and a relentless drive toward immortality. Who was this man? Probably most people who clicked on this video can answer that question to at least some degree. But by investigating the question of who Alexander was, we do not intend to simply restate the famous events of his life, but rather seek the psychological drivers behind Alexander's behavior. Such a project for any ancient person is, of course, necessarily highly speculative. It is our good fortune, dear viewer, that we are simply making YouTube videos, and find ourselves thus unbound by the rigorous evidentiary standards of academic scholarship. Here on the internet, we are perfectly allowed to speculate as much as we like. This profile will explore 4 psychological pillars central to understanding Alexander: his identity and ambition, his emotional relationships, his attitude toward death and destiny, and his eventual descent into paranoia and excess. From an early age, Alexander's sense of self was inflated by myth, religion, and parental influence. Olympias, his fiercely ambitious mother, insisted he was the son of Zeus, not Philip. This belief in divine origin shaped his psychological landscape. Alexander didn't just want to succeed, he needed to transcend the mortal realm. His education under Aristotle gave him a framework of Greek philosophy and heroic models, particularly Achilles from the Iliad, whom he reportedly idolized and emulated obsessively. This identity, half divine, half hero, led Alexander to seek glory that could only be achieved through extraordinary deeds. His ambition was not just to rule the world, but to be remembered eternally. This may explain his drive to name dozens of cities after himself, his visits to oracles, notably at Siwa, where he was confirmed as the son of Zeus Ammon, and his emulation of gods and demigods in appearance and ritual. The psychological need to confirm his mythic self-identity meant that his conquest was not merely political, it was existential. He conquered not just for power, but to validate his being. Alexander had a magnetic personality. He inspired loyalty among his troops, often sharing in their hardships, fighting alongside them, and calling them by name. His charisma was key to maintaining cohesion in a multi-ethnic empire, but his relationships were also marked by emotional intensity and, at times, possessiveness. He showed deep affection for key figures in his life, most notably Hephaestion, his lifelong friend and likely lover. Alexander compared their bond to that of Achilles and Patroclus. When Hephaestion died, Alexander's grief bordered on madness. He executed Hephaestion's physician, mourned for weeks, demanded divine honors for him, and reportedly cut his own hair in mourning. This intense emotional response suggests that Alexander may have had difficulty regulating attachment and loss, consistent with traits found in individuals with strong narcissistic or borderline tendencies. His relationship with his father, Philip II, was complex. Though he inherited Philip's military legacy, Alexander's psychological rivalry with him is evident. Philip was a great conqueror in his own right, but Alexander sought to eclipse him in every way, even refusing to name any of his conquests after Philip. Olympias's hatred of Philip and her manipulation of Alexander's loyalties likely intensified this inner conflict. Alexander may have felt the need to prove himself, not just as his father's equal, but as something far greater. Again, a godlike figure whose legacy would cast Phillips into the shadows. Alexander's psychological attitude toward death is unusually fearless, even fatalistic. He believed he had a destiny to fulfill, and this conviction gave him a sense of invulnerability. Whether facing Persian armies or crossing the treacherous Gedrosian desert, Alexander seemed to embrace risk as part of his divine mission. He once leapt into a besieged city alone, with only a few bodyguards, a suicidal move for anyone else. But to Alexander, it was a calculated display of immortality. He also believed in omens and prophecy, and his responses to them suggest a mixture of superstition and strategic manipulation. When the oracle of Siwa confirmed him as the son of Zeus, he did not publicize it widely in Greece, where this claim would be met with skepticism. But he did emphasize it in Egypt and Persia, where divine kingship was culturally accepted. This indicates not delusion, but a shrewd understanding of religious psychology, even as he may have increasingly believed his own myth. Toward the end of his life, Alexander became obsessed with legacy and divine recognition. He began demanding proskynesis, ritual prostration, from his Greek courtiers, a practice customary in Persia, but shocking to Macedonians. His insistence on this ritual hints at an evolving self-image. He no longer saw himself as merely a king or a general, but as a living god. This transformation was likely psychological as well as political, a merging of his mythic self-conception with the symbols of total authority. In the final years of his life, Alexander's personality showed signs of psychological strain, likely exacerbated by constant warfare, exhaustion, alcohol abuse, and the burdens of absolute power. His increasing tendency toward paranoia manifested in violent purges, including the execution of close associates like Parmenion and Clytus the Black, the latter killed in a drunken rage after criticizing Alexander's Persianizing behavior. Afterward, Alexander reportedly mourned Clytus deeply, suggesting not coldness, but unstable emotional regulation and impulsivity. The blending of Greek and Persian customs, his marriages to Roxana, Statera, and Parasatis, his inclusion of Persians in his army, his adoption of Persian dress, alienated many of his Macedonian followers. Though politically savvy, these acts also suggest a dissolving personal identity. Alexander no longer knew whether he was Macedonian, Persian, or something entirely new. His campaign into India, against armies that posed little threat to Macedon, may reflect not just military ambition, but an uncontrollable compulsion for conquest, a behavior pattern akin to addiction. By the time of his death in Babylon in 323 BCE, Alexander was a man whose mind carried the contradictions of a world he had tried to unite: divine and mortal, rational and superstitious, heroic and tyrannical. Whether he was poisoned, succumbed to fever, or died from exhaustion, the psychological causes of his end may have mattered more than the medical ones. Alexander the Great was not simply a conqueror or visionary leader. He was a man whose psychology fused myth and reality, ambition and vulnerability. His belief in his own divinity, his complex emotional attachments, his fearless confrontation with death, and his eventual descent into instability all reveal a deeply human struggle beneath the veneer of godhood. History remembers him as great, and rightly so, but his greatness was as much a product of psychological extremes as it was of strategic genius. In understanding Alexander's mind, we understand not only a man but the timeless allure and danger of the heroic ideal. What do you think? Do the 4 points of this analysis go some way to explaining the man behind the myth of Alexander the Great? Did we overlook anything of great relevance to Alexander's psychological inner life? Let us know in the comments below. This video is now in your past. We hope to see you here again in the future. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.